Welcome to another edition of Faith in Action. And this is Faith in Action on the road because we are in Nashville, Tennessee. It's part of the NRB weekend. And I am glad to say that I have met a wonderful guy tonight for the first time. And he's joining me on the road, on the mobile phone. It is wonderful to meet Ron Strand. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks, Robbie. Pleasure meeting you too.
You're welcome to Faith in Action. Welcome to UCB Ireland.
Yeah.
And I just thought what we'd do is just take an opportunity to talk about exactly that, faith in action. Now, before we get into that, okay, just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll go from there. Where are you from?
Sure. Well, I'm a native Southern Californian, but my wife and I moved here to the Nashville area 2 years ago, and a whole different lifestyle here. But I'm a business owner, owned a business for 40 years, but all during that time, I've always been in some type of ministry, some type of, doing something for the kingdom. And early years, I served in the ministry as a youth pastor. Later, I was a worship leader at a church for many years. And then most recently, 2009, we started a work called The Upper Room.
Okay.
The Upper Room Presents is the actual title of that.
The Upper Room Presents. Now, before I get into that, you talked about being in business, you talked about being a Christian from a young age. The phrase and the title of this podcast is Faith in Action. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means to me that, we live out our faith. I think the one thing that I see as I get older is, we need to be about the kingdom's work. And so my wife and I have always had that mindset. I started a business basically to make a living. As Paul would say, he was a tent maker,
Yeah.
And that's how I make my living. And we've been very, very fortunate to have a successful business and to be able to do the things that we've been able to do in terms of ministry. So we've supported ministries and we've done ministry. And so, faith without works is dead, as it says, right?
Yeah.
So living out our faith, to say faith in action is to me, sharing the gospel, ministering to people, and doing all those things that the scriptures tell us to do in terms of, living out our faith.
Do you think it's a sense that you have to have qualification or you have to have kind of theological background to be able to live out your faith and to be able to live that kind of life?
No, I don't think you do. I think, first a heart that is surrendered to Christ is the first most important thing. Depending on what you're going to be doing, if you're going to be teaching the scriptures or leading people, it's good to have a good background, and certainly a good background of the knowledge of the Word of God. But, I think our society has put an overemphasis on, for instance, seminaries, theological seminaries, and things like this. Nothing wrong with that. But I know many men who have done great works that have not been scholars, if you will.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think that's. I wouldn't be one of those guys.
Having spent this evening with you, yeah, I know that we've had such a good time.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Upper Room Presents. Talk to me about it. What is it, or what was it, or what will it be?
Yeah, it's a little bit on hiatus right now, but we started in 2009. One of the things that we did was I was invited by a fellow that you said you knew, a guy named Warren Duffy, who's a former broadcaster. He's since gone to be with the Lord. But in 2009, he invited me to a little home group where a fellow by the name of Ed McGlasson was speaking. Ed McGlasson is a former NFL player, National Football League, for those in Ireland. And he was a believer, he was a pastor, and he wrote a book about the heart of the Father. I was very impressed with the message that he did at that evening. So I invited him. I said, would you like to come to our home group? We had a little home group in our, Kathy and I hosted. And he said, I'd love to. Well, I went back to the home group and I said, hey, I've got Ed McGlasson coming. and told them about it. And I said, why don't we all invite friends and family to this? So by the time we did that with everybody in the home group, we had well over 70 people.
Wow.
So we decided to hold it in the upstairs of an office building that I own in California. And we started with a little worship set. I did worship with a couple of guys that were in the group. And then Ed came up and spoke. And it was such a fun evening, and people were really ministered to it. What was nice about it was something outside the walls of the church, that it was testimony, and it was a message. So that went well. So the next time I thought, well, you know what, I'd like to do this again. And I asked Warren Duffy if he'd come and speak the next month. So we did it again. And then I had lunch with Duffy, as they call him. And he said, Ron, what are you going to name this thing? You're doing this? And I said, yeah, I don't know. He says, well, Ron, it's on the upstairs of an office building. Why don't you call it the upper room? So I thought, well, that's perfect. So that's where the upper room was born. Then what we would begin to do is have, musical artists.
Okay.
Christian recording artists, singer-songwriters, bands. And so that started a tradition that went from 2009 all the way up to 2020. We changed venues, we grew out of that venue, and we did it all by donation. People didn't have to pay for a ticket. We would just say, hey, could you support this ministry? Well, the donations never rose to the level of supporting it, but we're fortunate where some people made up the difference. And but what was nice is it was a place where people could invite a friend who might not be comfortable going to a church.
Right.
We weren't trying to duplicate church, and there was no judgment on church whatsoever, nothing like that. But it was just a place where people could come and hear the gospel message through music, through the spoken word, and not feel threatened, in a sense that, this is a church thing, they're going to pray and they're going to call me out. And, I believe that we need to be bold in that, but what we did is we presented the gospel. I did give an invitation at the end, but it wasn't a long message. I just said, if you're here tonight and you don't know, what it means to have a relationship with Jesus, and I gave just a couple of brief scriptures, and I didn't ask for a hand raise. I would just, say, come and talk to us if that's you. And we would pray with them. And so that was what it looked like. And it was so very popular that, again, I think I mentioned we had 200 or 300 people coming on. Mm-hmm. We do it on Saturday evenings once a month. And then when COVID hit, we lost our venue. We were using the venue of a Lutheran church, their youth center, which was actually a pretty dialed-in, kind of cool little venue. And so at that time, I, felt disconnected with the audience. Okay. So I thought, well, why don't I start a podcast? And so I started doing a podcast in 2020. And I carried that on until just recently, I think I was telling you at dinner tonight that I think early 2025 was the last podcast I did in California. And we've since broken down that studio. We're moving it here to Tennessee. I'm going to reconstruct it and start that podcast again.
Did you find that when you were doing this, that this was putting your faith into action? And if so, what was your desired outcome? Did it happen? Did that outcome actually come to pass?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to capture in the podcast was testimony.
Right.
It's nothing more powerful than the testimony of an individual. And so I would interview various people, mostly musicians, but I would interview other people as well, and get their testimony. Those kind of people that you see maybe in ministry, or you see singing or something, but you don't know what their story is. What led them to Christ? They don't typically have time to do that in a concert. They might give you a couple little insights, but most people don't know that backstory. So I would delve into that backstory, find out what is it that brought you to Christ. And so it would present their message, basically, their testimony. So yes, I felt like it was achieved through that.
And was there a response to it from the people who viewed it, or the people who were at the upper room experience? Were people responding?
A lot of people were responding. I mean, it wasn't off the charts killer like, some people have today in terms of audience and followers, but it was building, and it was, like, for instance, we had, do you know who Don Moen is?
Yes, yeah.
Well, Don Moen is very, very popular in the Philippines.
Okay.
And I had a young man that was living with us at the time who was from the Philippines, and he was after me. You got to get Don Moen. You got to get Don Moen. Don's become a good friend since. He lives here in the Nashville area. But people tuned in from the Philippines by the thousands. It was, I don't remember the number, but it was well over 20,000 people. And then another one that's gotten over 1 million views is a comedian by the name of Jeff Allen.
Oh, yeah.
He's a believer, and he's here in Tennessee as well. But I did that in California, and mostly that was his followers, because he's very popular.
He hashtagged you.
He hashtagged me. So, but that introduces you to a new audience as well. So we were building that, and in our move, in the transition, and still running a business, I've had to kind of put it on hiatus.
Right.
And I'm anxious to get back to it. So we're gonna build the studio here in our home, in a little area that I have, and I want to start doing those again. There's a lot of people here in the Nashville area that would be interesting.
They have stories to tell.
Yes.
People we may know, people we may have listened to or have seen, but their story is something, like you said already, something that we don't get to hear a lot of.
Yeah.
There's something I'm going to touch on in a few moments' time, but I want to continue just a little bit about what you've done with the Upper Room and what you've done with your podcast, because there are people who will watch this and go, that's all right for him, because he has this big thing and he's been given this big thing to do and he's had a budget to do it and he knows what he's doing. And faith in action is not about the big thing, is it?
No, it's not. And as a matter of fact, one of the things my wife and I talk about is that almost everything that we've done that has been for the kingdom started out very small. And more importantly, we didn't even set out to do it.
Right.
When I started the Upper Room, it was just the response of, hey, have this guy come and speak and see. I didn't think, hey, I could start this and become a big work. It just evolved. And almost everything we've done has been that way. So it's not been big budget. It's not been big, production. Okay. Sometimes it was, depending what the event was. But it was small beginnings, and so that's how it evolved. Did I answer that correctly?
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking for?
I think that's an important thing to say, because an awful lot of people will go, unless, we talk about mission a lot, and people go, well, I can't go on mission because I can't go to another country. And, we used to say the Far East or whatever. Mission starts with our next door neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mission starts where God has planted us. And I think what I was trying to just make sure that people listening and people watching were able to understand that actually you start small, and what God grows, God grows.
That's right.
And that's always good to hear, because you always get people go, yeah, they've done 10 albums and 20 albums, but you forget that one song that actually took years to write, to do something with. You're an executive producer.
Yeah, I am. I didn't set out to be a filmmaker, but
we are in the presence of movie royalty. We really are. Over the last few years, we had the Jesus Revolution movie with Kelsey Kramer.
Correct.
And it had good reviews, odd reviews, strange, but it told a story. But actually, what you've been involved in is the love song documentary, which is the story behind the story.
Yeah. And Robbie, that's another good segue into small beginnings, because we didn't set out to do a documentary. For those that don't know, Love Song is a group that was a seminal group that came out of the Jesus movement in 1970. It was one of the first Christian rock bands.
Yeah.
That came into Chuck Smith's church in Calvary Chapel, which if you saw Jesus Revolution, that was that story.
Yeah.
And ironically, we started this documentary before they probably even had the thought of doing that, because this was an 8-year production and trying to get it funded and so forth. But we finally got it out just this last year, in September.
Yeah.
But what that was is I had Love Song come a couple of times to the upper room to perform. And, these guys were getting up there, but they were still really good in what they were doing. And I became friends with them over the years. So the last time I had them in 2017 to the upper room, I said, hey guys, what do you think if we film this and put out a live DVD? I know nothing about filmmaking, so I hired a production crew, and they came in with 4 cameras, but we didn't do anything in terms of prepping, and setting up shots and so forth. So we had a lot of footage, but what we realized is we had a lot of footage that we really couldn't use for a live DVD.
Okay.
So we thought, what do we do with this, So we did some cutaway interviews, and we put little clips in and do little cutaway interviews with the guys. And then we did a test market. We had 2 people we had 2 nights, 50 people each night, and we showed the film, what we did at that time.
Yeah.
This is back in probably 2000, right, probably before COVID.
Right.
And all of them said, we love the vintage film pieces and the stories in this. They love the concert footage, but they wanted to see more of the backstory. So what we ended up doing is a fellow by the name of Jerry Stanley in California, who's a director, producer. He heard about it and he said, I would love to be part of this project. And we had him come on board, and we spent the next 6 years, I think at that time, putting this together. And Jerry took it, I say he took it from zero to hero, and it was finally released. And so I'm jumping around a little bit, but this film is the actual backstory of, if you saw Jesus Revolution.
Right.
It's the true backstory. It's about the Jesus Revolution, the Jesus movement, told through the eyes of the band. It's certainly about the band, and it tells their story, but it's not so band-centric that it's, hey, a glory piece on them. It's the whole movement. And so there's a lot of footage in there. There's a lot of interviews from a lot of people that are very influential in the church, or who were touched by Love Song's music. Michael W. Smith is in there, and he says he was the one that inducted them into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. And what he said from the stage is, he said, I don't know that I'd be doing what I'm doing today if it hadn't been for Love Song. And that's a pretty powerful statement. There's a clip in there about where Chuck Smith, it's pre-recorded obviously because Chuck passed away in 2013, but he talks about when Love Song came in to his church way back. And, these roughing hippies, and he thought, geez, what am I going to do? It's a very touching story. And so there's a lot of stories like that in there. And what we wanted to do with this piece is not make it a, reminiscing look back thing, although it does have that. We didn't want to make it band-centric just to feed their egos. We wanted to tell the story, a piece of history, if you will, about the Jesus movement, the Jesus Revolution, which was born pretty much in, I think, Southern California. Yeah. And went worldwide. A phenomenal time. And it follows what the band did, and how God used this band into the Philippines, all over the world. And so it's a piece that we're really proud of. It's getting absolutely rave reviews. But we're at a place too, and this is not a push for money by any means, but we did it on a small budget, and so when you get to the end of something, you don't have the funds to really promote it. But the people that have bought it, and we've had good sales, but we'd certainly like to see it go more. But it's been very, very positive reviews on it.
We're talking about your life and how you change things because what God's called you to do, and the upper room experience, and just what God's called you, faith in action. And you go back to the 70s, and that's exactly what happened here. Yeah. Chuck Smith stepped out in faith, believing God was doing something different. And actually, an awful lot of people didn't like him for it.
That's right.
And sometimes it takes brave people to do things. And I remember watching the movie, and of course it'll be depicted differently, but I watched the movie and how the board, as it were, at the time were not happy about people sitting on the floor.
Yeah, right.
And Chuck was going, I want their souls saved. I'm not bothered where they're sitting.
Yeah.
But that takes real faith.
Yeah, the story was that they would come in because Calvary Chapel was near the beach there, Huntington Beach, California, and a lot of these guys would come in at the end of the day barefoot and with sand on their feet, and some of the old parishioners were saying, hey, they're messing up the carpet, and Chuck said, well, then let's pull out the carpet.
But that takes a step of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for you and others as well to go, we're going to tell the real story of a band. I have been a drummer all my life, and I remember becoming the drummer in our stream of churches in the UK in the 80s. And there were probably 15, 20 churches in the stream across the UK. And there were just 2 of us who were drummers.
Oh, is that right?
In the whole stream.
Yeah.
Because it's not really godly, is it?
Well, right. They didn't want drums in churches.
They didn't.
Yeah.
But back then, they didn't want guitars either.
Right.
So you get people like Love Song breaking the mold, doing something different, stepping out in their faith, their simplistic faith that says, we have been changed, so we need to tell of that change.
Yeah. Right.
And here we are now, some 50 years on, from that moment and that movement of God. And there's another group of guys going, we're going to step out in faith and tell the story.
Right. Yeah.
Because when I talk about radio and I talk about that sort of stuff with people, I say every decade has a move of God in the world of music.
Yeah.
And you look at the 70s, it was Love Song. You look at the 80s, it was Hosanna Music with Don Moen.
Yeah.
You look at the 90s, it was probably the breakout of Hills, and early 2000s, Darlene Check, and all of that. And here we are today. People say, I don't like today's music.
Yeah.
You go, actually, 50 years ago, that's exactly what was being said as well.
Yeah.
It takes people of faith. It takes people to do something and to stretch out. And with the documentary, first of all, how can people get hold of it and how can people support it?
Well, it's on Amazon. In Ireland, I assume it's the same as Amazon. So you can find it. It's called A Band Called Love Song.
Okay.
A Band Called Love Song. They could also go to the website. It's also on Salem Now, which I think is more of the States.
It's more US,
Yeah. But the website is abandcalledlovesong.com.
Okay, and people, especially people of an age who will remember and maybe even have an album from Love Song sitting in their cupboard, if they wanted to support you, if they wanted to get involved and say, you know what, I want to do something, they can go to the website.
Go to the website, and then, or they could reach out to me personally. The way it's set up now, I'm not even sure if we're able to take donations anymore because we've set up corporations, but to produce this. But there may be a way. But if somebody's interested in getting involved, I'd certainly be willing to talk to them. They can reach me at ron@theupperroompresents, ron@theupperroompresents.com.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that we get a ticker tape across the back end of this and some way for people to get in touch with you at the end of the podcast. And towards the end of this brief conversation, there's so much within your life that we could delve into that time just won't allow. But maybe you'll come back again.
I'd love to.
And maybe I'll come back to you. And we'll sit down in another room like this in the heart of Nashville and talk.
Yeah, and I'll interview you.
Yeah, well, why not? We could do something like that. There are going to be people as I said earlier on, who go, it's all right for him. Or they look at me and go, it's all right for Robbie Frawley because, he's done this all his life or whatever. You got any advice for people who can live their life as faith in action?
Yeah, as I was thinking of that, as you mentioned, faith in action. God uses us where we are, just right where we are. As I mentioned, I didn't set out. I'm not this high achiever. I'm always going to do something and rah rah. I'm going to do this. I like to say I have a road to Damascus experience of coming to Christ, and that would be a whole nother story about my testimony. But God's always kind of had to knock me over the head a little bit, to do something.
Yeah.
And I'll do something small. And it's just, sometimes it's just taking that little step. Mm-hmm. Because God wants to use every one of us. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, how much money you have, how much education you have. It's nothing about that. It's about saying, here I am, God, use me. And that's where he takes us. And, if we're sincere in that, he'll reveal what it is. And it could just be stepping out, going to church, seeing what there might be to do there, and seeing what happens with that. It's God just wants to use us, and a yielded heart is what he wants, contrite spirit and a yielded heart, and he'll use us. There's no magic formula. Yeah, it sounds like I've done some things that are interesting, but gosh, I'm just an average guy that just availed myself to it, and God was gracious enough to use me in that. So,
Ron, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and I can't wait actually to come back again and hear your testimony properly. Yeah. We'll do another edition.
Sure.
Thank you for taking time to be on Faith in Action.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate it.
It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
You've been watching a very special edition of Faith in Action on the road from Nashville, Tennessee. Until next time, take care. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Yes.